Today I'm gonna show you how to get wildcard certificate from Letsencrypt and automate renewal process. The challenge here that only DNS verification is supported. That means every time when you renew your certificate, you have to update your TXT records. The Letsencrypt will generate certificate for you for 90 days. So roughly every 60 days, you have to manually update your TXT records. Certbot has support for few DNS providers, but in this video, I'm gonna show you the very generic approach that's gonna work with all DNS providers. We're gonna run acme-DNS. It's very limited DNS server, and that server will answer those challenges from Letsencrypt. All right, let me explain how it works. So for example, you have the Ubuntu server and you want to obtain the wildcard certificate. So you're most likely gonna use the Certbot and you will request the certificate from Letsencrypt. Then Letsencrypt will create the challenge for you. It needs to prove from you that you the owner of your domain. And the way how you prove it, you will request TXT record in your DNS provider, and then Letsencrypt will query your domain for TXT records and verify that that TXT record is present. And when it can prove it, then it will generate and give you the certificate. So in that case, so it's gonna give you the certificate for 90 days, and around every 60 days you would need to update that certificate. That means you have to go through this process all over again. To create a challenge and update the TXT records. In this video, I'm gonna show you how to use acme-DNS server to automate this process. So basically, we're gonna run very simple DNS server on our Ubuntu server. It will only provide TXT records for Letsencrypt. So every time when Letsencrypt will create a challenge, it will query DNS provider, and that DNS provider will outsource those TXT records to our DNS server. And in that way, we can automate that process. All right, let me quickly show you the small demo how to get that certificate. We're gonna be using the Certbot in this video, and in order to get the wildcard certificate, we're gonna use the Certbot cert only. Then it's gonna be kind of manual step, but it's not actually manual. We automated it with our acme-DNS server. Then this part will indicate that we're gonna talk with the staging environment for Letsencrypt. So it's not gonna be the kind of real certificate just because I'm testing it and I'm getting a lot of certificates. And you have the rate limit on Letsencrypt. So if you're gonna remove this part, you're gonna get the real certificate. Then the wildcard only requires you to use DNS challenge. So that's here, and then we're gonna provide the manual out hook, and we're gonna use the acme-dns-client that we're gonna install in this video. And here the most important part, that's the wildcard certificate. So it says kind of manual process, but actually it's not manual, since it's got the TXT records will be created automatically for you. So let me run this command. All right, so again, we need to provide our email. And here, yes, I don't want to share my email. All right, now it's gonna request certificate and it wait for DNS challenge here. So DNS challenge for DevOps example.io. So it's running and updating the TXT record for us, and you can see that we got this wildcard certificate. And just to show you, you can use the D command. For example, let me open the new terminal and run d -t says that we want to see the TXT records for acme challenge domain. Let's run it, and this is actually TXT record that our DNS server created for us. So if we go back to Google Domains, we don't have actually TXT records here, and that's the benefit of using that acme-DNS server. It's gonna create those TXT records for us, and that's the way how you can automate, because DNS server will do it automatically for you. So, and just to see that certificate, you can use the cat command, sudo cat, and then let certificate. And that's going to be our certificate. Let me grab it. And let me go to the Google. You can use OpenSSL to decode it, or decode certificate. And here you can paste it, and it says that it's kind of valid, and you can see that this is for the wildcard. The common name is wildcard, and alternative name, which is more important part, valid. And you have the dates. And well, since we used that flag test cert, that it obtained the certificate from the staging environment of Letsencrypt. So if you're not gonna use that flag, it will obtain the real certificate, which is, well, the workflow is exactly the same. Alright, for this tutorial I'm going to be using AWS, but you don't have to. So the first I want to do is to go to EC2 and create a key pair that I'm going to be able to SSH to that instance. Let's create the key pair. Let's call it DevOps. Now let's go ahead and create a security group for our instance. Let's call it web. And let's add few inbound roles. The first one will be SSH. So since we want to SSH, and we're gonna say all IP addresses allowed to SSH. For this tutorial is fine. But usually you want to restrict this. And also, since we're gonna be running the DNS server that will answer Letsencrypt challenges, we need to open UDP and TCP. UDP is used for small requests. Let me do, and let's add DNS TCP. And TCP protocol is used for DNS when the data size exceeds 512 bytes. All right, let's do all IP addresses as well, and let's create it. Now let's go ahead and create EC2 instance. Launch. Let's search for Ubuntu 2004. So let's take T2 micro. And here I'm gonna place it. Right now I have two subnets, private with the NAT gateway and public with the internet gateway. So I'm gonna use the public, and I'm not gonna be using the after assign IP public IP address. I'm gonna use the elastic IP address. So it's gonna be disabled here. No roles, nothing, and it's gonna have only one single interface. Okay, let's add storage, keep storage default, tags, and for security group, let's select our web security group with the DNS SSH port open. Let's review, launch, and let's acknowledge that we have the DevOps key pair, and let's create it. All right. Now let's go ahead and create the elastic IP address, static elastic IP address. We already have one, and let's create another one. Allocate elastic IP, and that's going to be our region. Amazon pool is fine. And then you can add tags. I'm going to skip this. Allocate. Now I have the elastic IP address. Right, let's click Actions, and then associate elastic IP address with our instance. So let's select our instance, and also we need to select the IP address, the private IP address of that instance. And let's click Associate. All right, let's go back. Now let's install acme-DNS server. The first thing you want to SSH to that instance. Let's grab the public IP address. Let's go to the terminal, and before we can SSH, we need to update the permissions on that key pair. Let's go to downloads, and here we need to change permissions on that private key. Make it more restricted. All right, and now we can SSH. Let's use SSH command, and we need to provide well, that's the private key, and this is the username for that Ubuntu, and now we need a public IP address. Let's grab this here, and let's SSH. Let's say yes. All right. Now let's create a folder for acme-DNS. Sudo mkdir, all right, and switch directory to that folder. All right. Now let's go ahead and let me quickly show you the Acme server, Acme DNS. Well, DNS. And that's the Acme DNS server that we are using. That's the one. All right. So you can, from the GitHub, from the releases pages, you can find the release and you can download that tar. And well, I have the instructions on my blog, so you can follow. The link will be in description, so you can grab all the commands and just paste them, and it's gonna work. And all right, so now we downloaded our tar locally, and now we need to unzip it, untar it. All right. And let's go ahead and create the soft link that we can execute our command. And it's a best practice to run it as the user. So let's go ahead and create a very minimal user, Linux user for our Acme DNS. That's the command, right? Now we need to update our Acme DNS config. And that's the folder, Acme DNS config. And let me use Vim. You can use Nano or whatever you want, whatever text editor you like. Let me update it. And here is the important part. The first one is the listen. So since it's gonna be a publicly exposed DNS server that will answer only TXT records. So it's not gonna serve A records or CNAME records, only TXT. And we need to be able to, I would say, bind it to the public IP address. But you're not gonna be able to bind it to the, most likely you're not going to be able to bind it to all interfaces because one of them is allocated for internal system D service. So it's not going to work. What you need to do in AWS, you need to bind it to the private IP address, and it will be exposed through the public IP, elastic public IP address as well. So let's grab the private IP address for that instance. And let's use it here. All right. Now protocol. We're gonna use both protocols. And for DNS, let me update it to my DNS. It's gonna be devops by example.io. Let me copy this, and the same thing for the zone name server. All right, and this is the email address. And instead of @ symbol, you have to use dot. So let me use my email.com. All right, now here under records, we need to, again, use our DNS, devops by example.io, and that's obviously going to be yours, right? And here we need to hardcode our public IP address. Let me grab it from here. All right. Now, also, we need to update the NS records. Let me grab it. And here as well. So, what it says that this particular, when the DNS request comes to our DNS provider, in my case, it's going to be Google. So all the TXT records or all the responses will be redirected to, well, all the TXT records that use this subdomain will be redirected to this DNS server. And I will show you later how it works. So right now, just follow the same, use just your domain here and your private IP address. And few things. for API. This API will be used to automate this renewal process. So I don't want to expose it to internet. I'm gonna use only localhost 127.0.0.1. That means only locally I'm gonna be able to access it. Also, I don't want 443 or any certificates for that. Let me use 8080. This can be any port. And like I said, for this internal API, I don't need any certificates. Let me say no. And that's pretty much it. All right, let me save it. Our configuration. And also we have the systemctl service definition that comes with this Acme server that we need to move to the proper location. Let me move this acme-dns server to the systemd. All right, this is one, and we need to reload daemon reload. All right, now we can start our DNS server and enable it. Let's enable it first, and also let's go ahead and start it. All right, now we can check and verify the status and see if we have any errors. And it's running and it doesn't have any errors. And in case of the error, you can use journalctl command and provide the unit. Unit is the systemctl name. So you can use this command, no pager, and follow. And it's going to be a very convenient way to get the output and all the errors if you have one. So I don't have any errors, but I still need to create few DNS records. Right, let me cancel this. Now let's go ahead and go to our DNS provider. It can be any DNS provider, it doesn't matter. So I have my domain hosted with Google domains. Let me go to the Google domains, my domain, and here develops by example. Let's go to the DNS. And I don't have any DNS records just yet. So the few requirements. First of all, you need to create the first DNS record, which is the A record. Let me just use 5 minutes to tell. It's going to be a record, and it will point to our DNS server, and that's going to be the public IP address. Let me use that here. Let me add it. All right. Now we need to create an S record for our DNS pointing to, well, let me create it first and I'll explain what does it mean. So we need to create another record, which is NS name server record, same thing, 5 minutes, and it will point to here. So it's basically auth develops by example.io. This means that this auth develops by example.io is responsible for any subdomains, any TXT records. So it will be responsible for answering all the questions for our TXT records. And I'll show you an example later so you can understand it better. At this point, it's done. We configured our DNS server. And now we need another thing. We need acme-dns-client. And if you, again, Google acme-dns, they have the client for Certbot. So if you scroll down, they have this client. So we're going to be using this client that will be responsible for calling and, well, to updating the records using this API DNS server. All right, so in order to install it, let's go ahead and download it from the GitHub releases first, the tar archive. Let's download this. Now then let's unpack it. Okay, and also let's go ahead and create the soft link that we can use this client. So, well, as a sudo, of course. All right. The next step is to install the Certbot. So the Certbot will actually do the main work for obtaining and renewing certificates. And for this example, I'm going to be using I'm going to be getting just plain certificates. It's not integrated with Nginx or anything else, but it will work exactly the same with Nginx plugin. So let me install Certbot first. I'm going to be using the snap. Let's refresh it and let's install Certbot. Now let's create the soft link. We're going to create two user being Certbot. And now we can actually execute it. And also there is another command that you need to run. Certbot trust plugin with root. Okay, that's fine. Okay, it's time to create the Acme account with Letsencrypt. Let's use the sudo certbot register. Now it's gonna register with Letsencrypt. And here it's very important that you provide your actual domain name, well, actual email address, because the Letsencrypt will send you alerts if you fail to renew the certificate and it's gonna be close to be expired. Letsencrypt will send you email and remind you that you have to renew your certificate. So make sure this is your correct email address. Now, am I agree? Sure, I'm agree. And do I want to share my email? No, I don't. All right, now we registered it. Now we need to create the Acme DNS account for our domain. All right, let me create it. So it's going to be the one that we downloaded previously, acme-dns-client, and it has command register. And then we're going to register for DevOps by example.io. That's going to be your domain. And this localhost, this is actually the IP API that provided by Acme DNS itself. All right, so let's register first. And you want to DNS client to monitor. So it will help us to make sure that it's correct, configured correctly. Let's say yes. Now we need to add last record. So it's going to be the Acme challenge. That's going to be the CNAME record. Let me grab this. Go to DNS, Google Domains, and let me create the Acme DNS CNAME, 5 minutes, and the value will be a very unique value. So that's going to be the value it generated by that API. Let me put it here. Let me click add. All right, so, and also this client will wait for 15 seconds and it will query DNS, verify that your DNS set up correctly. So it says 48 hours, but usually a couple minutes, maybe seconds even. So we should not abort or exit. We need to verify that our DNS actually correct. Acme challenge. Let's wait a few minutes till it will verify. All right, it was able to verify CNAME record is correct. You can also optionally set up CAA record. You can read about it, but it's not required. I'm gonna say no for this tutorial. All right, so we're almost done. Now, well, it's time to actually obtain the wildcard certificate. And in order to do that, we're gonna run the following command. We're gonna use the Certbot, and there is a command cert only. So it's gonna obtain the certificate only. And like I said, when you obtain the certificates for wildcard, the only one challenge supported is DNS challenge. So that's the required part, manual and, well, DNS challenge. Also, there is another command, test cert. Basically, just the Letsencrypt has two environments: production environment and staging environment. From production environment, it generates you actual certificates, but it has the rate limit, how many certificates you can obtain. So you can use test cert flag, and it will talk to the staging environment from Letsencrypt. It's going to be exactly the same thing, but just when you develop your workflow or your scripts, I would highly recommend to use staging environment instead. Let's do that. And then under the manual auth hook, we're gonna provide the client, acme-dns-client that we installed previously. And here, the most important part, that's the wildcard certificate for devotes-by-example.io, that this star represents the wildcard. So the certificate will be valid for all subdomains. And the way how it's gonna work, we're gonna create this challenge. Well, we're gonna request it, then Letsencrypt will create a challenge with TX2 record that we need to prove that we own this domain. And this Acme DNS will actually update the DNS record for us. So it's even if it says manual, but it's not actually manual since we're using this Acme DNS server. Let me run it. And the last thing that I want to show you here is that you can renew your certificate. So it's going to be a similar command here, Certbot renew, manual, but like I said, it's not real manual. And this test cert is for the staging environment. So if you're going to avoid this, it's going to get renew the actual certificate. Then dry run, it will actually try to update those DNS records and do all of that. If you're not going to use dry run, since it's a new certificate, it will not even try to renew it because it's a fresh new certificate. Prefers challenge, and then the same thing. Let's run it, and it will actually again create the Letsencrypt challenge, and it will verify that the certificate can be updated, can be renewed. And if you again use dig to query your DNS, you're gonna get the second text record. So it's done for you here. All right, and the really last thing that I want to show you here is to set up the cron job. So in order to do that, let's use the sudo command. And then I'm gonna be using a vim. Let me do 2, and at the end, let me add the cron job. So the recommendation from the Letsencrypt that you would run this command twice a day. And the reason behind it, that sometimes Letsencrypt can revoke certificates, and just to avoid the long downtime for your website, you should run it twice a day. And if the certificate is not close to be updated, it's not going to do anything. So it's completely safe to run it twice a day. And it says that it's going to be run twice a day, Certbot renewal, manual process. And again, for your case, you need to remove this test cert, and in that way it will get you the real certificate. Preferred DNS, manual hook, everything is the same. Let's save, and that's pretty much it. And you can use the sudo l, and you're gonna find that you have the cron job set up. All right, that's all for this video. Thank you for watching. Please, if you really think that this is helpful, please like this video and subscribe to my channel. Thank you. Bye-bye.